Hey guys, what's going on? So in today's lesson, I'm going to tell you the secret to being able to understand and even speak more like a native. But before we get into today's lesson, I want to let you know that if you're new here, every single week we guide you beyond the classroom so that you can understand fast-speaking natives, communicate confidently with anyone, and connect to the world. So if you want to be able to do that and more, it's really simple. You just have to hit that subscribe button and the bell down below so you don't miss any of our new lessons. So today we're talking all about connected speech. So what is connected speech? Maybe you have heard this term before, but if you haven't, it's going to really revolutionize your English. So connected speech is how we natives cut and connect our words together, and really it's what gives English its musicality. It's what gives it its flow and rhythm. And normally non-natives don't do this. So what non-natives, what English learners typically do, is they see a sentence and they think of it as every single individual word in that sentence. Now when you speak like this, it can sound really robotic. It sounds really unnatural. Now, what do natives do? We actually look at it more as units of words. So like which of these words actually come together. And it makes a lot of sense once you start to focus on it, but when you're new to it, it can seem really confusing. But in fact, this is so important because a lot of learners actually say that we natives just speak so fast. A large problem of it is not just that we speak fast, but it's that this is happening, this connected speech is happening, and your regular traditional classes haven't really prepared you for it. So when you encounter it, it just seems like a jumble of words, a jumble of sounds, and you really can't understand what natives are saying. Now, connected speech exists in every single accent of English, but today I'm just going to focus on connected speech in American English. Now, I'm guessing you're probably wondering, why exactly does this happen? Why do natives do this? And how can I know if different units of words are going to connect to each other or if they're going to be separated? Now, this comes down to a principle called content and function words. Now, we emphasize content words while we de-emphasize the function words. So what exactly are content and function words in case you haven't heard about this before? So content words really bring the meaning of the sentence. They are the verbs, the nouns, the adjectives. And really just by looking at the content words, usually we can understand most of what the person is trying to communicate. And then the function words are kind of what links everything together. So this is things like the articles, the prepositions, and the other kind of smaller words that help to kind of give a little bit of extra meaning to the phrase. So I'm not going to go too much into this concept of content and function words here because we actually did a lesson on our Learning with TV channel that I highly recommend that you check out if you haven't yet, because it's a really fun way to learn about this concept with some of your favorite TV series. But just to give you a quick example, so let's look at the sentence, I am going to go to the store. Now that's probably how you might hear an English teacher say it in a really slow way, or how a learner might even say this, because it sounds kind of robotic. It's not how you would actually hear a native say this. Now, how would a native say this? A native would say, I'm going to go to the store. Now, that probably to you sounded like just a really big jumble of sounds, right? It's just not very clear what exactly I was saying if I hadn't said it slowly before. Now, it probably wasn't so hard for you to hear those content words, like the verb go or the noun store. But all those function words in the middle, probably if I hadn't said it slow before, would be completely lost to you. So let's take a look at how this kind of breaks down. So we have, for example, the helper verb am, and that reduces and connects to the I. Now this is actually a contraction, which we see all the time. So we say I'm instead of I am. And we also have going to. Now you probably have heard before that we reduce going to gonna. Then, as I said, we fully say go and store, but then we reduce the words that go in the middle, to the. Now this is really common, so we would say to the, or if it has a vowel before it, da the. So instead of saying I am going to the store, a native would say I'm going to go to the store. Now, as I said before, if you don't do this, if you don't reduce your function words, then your speech could sound kind of robotic. And that's not necessarily a problem because people can still understand you. So really the most important part of learning connected speech like this is that you're able to understand natives when we use it. Now, if you want to sound more like a native, then of course you can practice this a lot and it will help you a lot to have more of a native accent like that. but as I said, it's not 100% necessary. Now, something else that we'll see where this is really common is with phrasal verbs. So usually we have, in a phrasal verb, we have of course a verb and one or two particles. Now the verb gets emphasized, that's a content word, but the particles are function words, so we reduce them. So for example, if I say come over, I'd actually connect that M to the next word, so I'd say come over. Or how about run out of? Now, a native wouldn't say run out of, a native would say run out of or run outta. And we could also look at another one, catch up. Now, that CH at the end, again, will connect to the particle up, so it becomes catch up, catch up. Now, this probably seems kind of confusing up till now, but we're going to actually look at some different principles of connected speech that happen all the time, and just by learning those, they're going to help you a lot in being able to understand natives and to start kind of tweaking your accent. Now, you probably already have noticed in these function words when they're reduced, that schwa sound is really common. And if you don't know it, that schwa is that sound, that's a vowel, that is actually the most common sound in American English. Actually, I think in all accents of English. But before we move on to those principles of connected speech, I wanted to tell you about a really fantastic way for you to learn connected speech and to really make it a part of your own speaking. And that is with our real-life native immersion course. Now, with this course, you will learn with real-life native conversations, and with our PDF Power Lessons, we actually break it down the entire transcript of every conversation and show you every instance of connected speech and how you can start identifying this better. Plus, you also will learn about vocabulary, grammar, pronunciation, and so much more. So you can try that for free with our Power Learning Week. And it's really simple. Just click up here or down in the description below to learn more and sign up for that. And we look forward to seeing you inside. All right, so now let's look at some of those principles of connected speech that are going to help you a ton in being able to understand natives when you watch TV series or you listen to the radio or music or anything else like that. So the first one, maybe you've encountered before, so I'm not going to go into it in too much depth because we talk about it all the time over on our Learning English with TV series channel, so definitely go check that out if you haven't yet. But this happens in American English when we have a T between two vowel sounds. So we actually saw an example of this before. When I said run out of, did you actually hear how I said that part out of? Now, I didn't say out of, I said outa. Now, this is how most Americans will pronounce this. That T sound in the middle actually warps to kind of a D sound. Now, this is very similar to the R sound in Latin languages like Spanish and Portuguese. So it's just a very quick flick of the tongue at the top of the mouth. So I didn't say outa, I said outa, outa. And you can hear this in other words like butter, or cat and dog would become cat and dog. So this happens even between words. So the next thing we're going to look at that happens all the time in native speech is what happens to pronouns. So pronouns that begin with an H, like he, his, or her, we will often drop that H sound and connect it to the preceding word. So for example, if I say, what did he do? I would actually drop that H sound in he and connect it to did. So I wouldn't say, what did he do? I'd say, what did he do? Now, you could completely miss the he there probably if you're not accustomed to this, and you wouldn't even be sure of like, who are we talking about? Let's look at a couple more examples. So we could say, for example, he doesn't know her. So did you see I dropped the H sound and I connected that W from know to her. So he doesn't know her, know her. We could also say that with his, that what is his problem, for example. So I would say, what is his problem? So we have the American T there happening because the T falls between wa and is, so it becomes what is, and then the S, or actually that Z sound from is, connects to the pronoun. So what is his problem? What is his problem? And this also happens with the pronoun them. We will drop that TH sound and we're just left with So instead of saying, I will call them, I would say, I'll call them. I'll call them. Or similar to the example we looked at before, instead of saying, I don't know them, I would say, I don't know them. I don't know them. So moving on, another thing that we Americans often reduce is when we have an N followed by a T. So what happens in these cases is that we'll actually drop the T sound many times. So this can happen, for example, in the middle of words. So let's take the word internet and international. What do you think happens here? So instead of saying internet or international, I would say internet, international. But this doesn't just happen in the middle of words, it can also happen when we have a word ending in NT and the next word begins with a vowel, and you would have to have a content word and a function word here. So for example, the kind of common preposition, if we say that something is in front of something else, we would say in front of, in front of. Let me give you another example. So if I say I went out, I would actually say I went out. And another expression that you might hear in American English is we say, I can't even. Now we say this, for example, when we just can't believe something that happened. So we wouldn't say, I can't even, we'd say, I can't even. And then finally, with the NT, you probably already know that when we have the word not, we contract it often with the verb. So for example, we say does not, doesn't, and has not, hasn't. But we don't actually say doesn't or hasn't. We say doesn't, hasn't, so we drop that T sound once again. So next, we're going to look at the sound of. Now, we have this both in the preposition of, and we also have it when the verb have is part of a contraction. So let's take a look first at the preposition of. So this will reduce simply to an sound. That's the schwa sound once again. So for example, if I say the Queen of England, I would reduce that to the Queen of England. We have a popular breakfast in the US that's called cream of wheat, but an American probably would say cream of wheat. Or if, for example, I want to say, I understand your point of view, I wouldn't say point of view, I would say point of view. Now actually there, that's interesting too, because we have that NT that we saw before, so it becomes point of view, not point of view or point to view, but point of view. Now as I mentioned, the same exact thing happens with have when we reduce it and add it to a contraction. So instead of us saying could have, would have, or might have, we'll reduce that simply to the schwa sound again. So I would say coulda, woulda, or mighta. Now did you hear that American T in might? Now when I just say the word might, I say a true T, but because it's might have and we reduce that again, it becomes mighta. So that's that American T once again. Okay, so next we have reductions with Y. Now, this is really common because the word you is often a function word. So we will actually have some sound morphing here. Now, this happens in two cases with two consonants. The first one is when we have a T plus a Y. Now, this becomes a ch sound. And the same thing happens when we have D plus Y, but instead of it being ch, it becomes a J sound, so it's j. Now, I'm not going to give you too many examples here or anything because I recently explained this in another lesson where we talked about school English, what they taught you at school, versus real life English. So I highly recommend you check out that lesson next. Fantastic, so we only have two more, and the next one that we're going to look at is something really funny that happens when we have two consonants together. So what I mean by this is when we have a word that ends in the consonant and the next word begins with the same exact consonant. So let's look at some examples of this to make it clearer. So for example, if I say that a store has cheap prices, now I wouldn't say both of those P's because that's kind of difficult for me to pronounce in my mouth. So this actually makes your speaking a little bit easier because you don't want to get all tripped up by that. You can just drop one of those P sounds. So a native, instead of saying cheap prices, would say cheap prices. So we drop that first P and then we link them together, cheap prices. So let's look at some more examples of this. How about a place that you would go if you have a car? The gas station becomes the gas station. So gas station. And maybe you like reading, so you would join a book club, but a native wouldn't say book club because that's really tricky for our mouths again. We'd say book club, book club. And then finally, I've given you all examples with consonants, but this also happens with vowels. So if, for example, I want to say, we each have a fantastic time learning English, I wouldn't say we each, I'd say weech. Weech have a great time. Weech have a great time. So we're going to look at something else now. The final principle also has to do with when we have a vowel sound. And that is the vowel U, because we get a really strange sound morphing there. So when a word ends in a U sound, and I don't just mean the letter U, I mean the sound U, so that's that oo sound. We will actually often transform it to a W if the following letter, the beginning letter of the next word, is a vowel as well. So for example, if I want to say, who is it? Say I have someone just knocked on the door and I want to say, who is it? I wouldn't say, who is it? I would say, who is it? So did you hear what happened there? Listen again. Who is it? Now, what happens when we have a U sound followed by another vowel is it becomes a W sound. So it's who whiz it. That's a very strange sound morphing, I know, but it happens all the time in native speech. And as I said, you notice that there, who ends in an O, but it's an oo sound. So say you want to give a friend a compliment and you want to say, you are the best. That's a really great alternative to saying thank you. But you wouldn't say, you are the best. You'd say, you are the best. You are the best. And you could also say, you always do that. Maybe someone does something that really annoys you. So you'd say, you always do that W sound again. All right, so I hope this has given you a little bit of clarity. I hope you've taken notes. And it's really important that you start actually paying attention to this in anything that you watch or listen to. Now, something really great that you can do is when you're watching something, either with subtitles or without, you can actually check yourself. If you didn't understand something, go back and listen again. And this is where the subtitles come in handy. Because say you watched it first without subtitles, you didn't understand something, you go back, you watch again with subtitles. What I want you to do when this happens is actually try to figure out, what didn't I understand here and why was that? Now, was that due to some connected speech? And you can actually take a look at some of the principles that we looked at today and try to figure out what exactly was happening here. Was there some sound morphing? Was a function word here reduced? Now, if you start doing this, you're just going to see huge improvements in your ability to understand your favorite TV series, music, the radio, podcasts, and so much more. And another thing that can be really helpful here is if you have a teacher or the guidance of a native. So one way that you can do this, of course, is by getting a really fantastic coach or teacher, and make sure that it's someone who knows a little bit about how natives actually pronounce things, and that they can kind of coach you in this connected speech, whether you're wanting to actually speak that way or just be able to understand it. And another great way to do this, as I said, is with our real-life native immersion course, because I and Justin and another teacher, Chad, will actually be the ones that are guiding you through the journey of learning English. So I hope you've had a lot of fun today. Thanks so much for joining me, and I'll see you next week. Now it's time to go beyond the classroom and live your English. Aw, yeah. So let's look at some instances of this that you will find all the time. So in school, they probably taught you to say these like Serious Sam. Let's see, got to, want to, have to, going to. However, it's pretty uncommon that you will hear natives speak this way. Most natives will actually speak like my friend, Street Stan. Yeah, man, I'd say like gotta, wanna, gonna, have to. So maybe you already know about those ones.